Hello, welcome to our Betfred Sports Talk here at the Quest Media Network studios. I'm Lewis and I'm joined by Peter Spencer from Betfred and Ian Cheeseman. Um, First of all, there's only one place to start, the FA Cup final this weekend. What are the odds looking like for the FA Cup final, Peter?
Well, I know Ian won't agree with this, particularly as is in his blue top, which I've never seen in any other colour but blue, is it, I think. But the odds are, not surprisingly, Manchester City are the odds-on favourites with Betfred. They're 4-9 to go and win the FA Cup. That'll be the second leg of what City fans hope will be a treble. United are 9-2 to upset the apple cart and ruin City's chances of getting a treble. Of course, United fans will be out for a huge game here because they'll be wanting to upset the apple cart and end City's hopes of matching what Manchester United did in 1999. So I've spoken to Fred and he's got a real dilemma on Saturday because Betfred are sponsoring the Derby, which is a huge horse racing event, and that's been going since 1780, and that goes on at Epsom. That starts at 1:30. They brought it forward so the police can work at the Derby and also the go to Wembley at 3 o'clock. So he's got a 20-mile journey across London if he's going to make both events. He's saying at the moment he's not going to be able to make it, but it'll be the first time ever that he's never been to Wembley when City or United are playing. Now he thinks it'll be 2-0 for Manchester United, predictably, as a big United supporter. And the odds on that, and get this, it's 33-1. So you can see how it's against the odds that 33-1 for United to win 2-0. You think Casemiro will score the first goal, and that's a 20-1 shot.
And are you in agreement with that? Ian, do you think United will win 2-0?
Anything can happen in a one-off game. These are cup ties. The league, which City obviously have already wrapped up, is over 38 games, so you can have slip-ups and you can have a bit of loss of form and whatnot. The trouble with FA Cup finals, Champions League finals, League Cup finals, whatever they are, it's over 90 minutes in one game. There's so many variables come into it, which is why the odds of different teams winning and getting goals are a bit longer maybe than they would be for predicting the outcome of a league campaign. I think City will go into that absolutely fired up, of course. They rested all the players against Brentford and to a certain extent against Brighton, so they should be fresh, ready to go, but there's a lot of pressure on them. United, as Peter's mentioned, highly motivated off the field, on the field. Fans, everybody, they're going to be so determined to stop City from completing the treble, and we're almost dismissing the FA Cup final and winning the FA Cup in itself as an entity. I mean, a few years ago, if somebody said to me as a City fan, as a journalist who's covered them, City could be in the FA Cup final, they could win it, I'd be excited about it. This one, it ironically becomes, of the three trophies that City are going for, the one that you're probably least bothered about. But if this had been City against Brighton, then perhaps the pressure would have been off. But this is City against United. So all that sort of frustration that Blues fans have felt about being the second best team in Manchester and having that banner up at the Stretford end, saying how many years it was since they won a trophy. It's a derby, you've got to win the derby, haven't you? You've got to win the Manchester derby. But then United have got all that motivation too. I actually think this will be a much tougher game for City than the Champions League final. That doesn't mean to say they're going to win it, because it's a one-off game. But I actually think that the FA Cup final is the harder one to win because of what motivation in sport is everything. And United will never have been more motivated.
You say motivation, but there's also a question of momentum as well. And I wonder whether Pep Guardiola has rested too many players, because some of them won't have played for a couple of weeks now. We think of De Bruyne, for instance, and other players who relished being on that pitch and doing their fantastic work. De Bruyne being the best, in my opinion, best midfielder ever in the history of the Premier League. He's absolutely sensational. And there's players like him who must be desperate to have played in the last few games. And they're going to have to come back a little bit cold. There is a big difference between players who are great on the training pitch as opposed to match fitness. And I wonder whether he's got that a little bit wrong going into this game. Because like you, I agree, this is the tough one. Much, much harder than that Champions League final.
And are you confident that you'll get the treble done?
Listen, I'm a City fan, a long-standing City fan. You're not confident about anything. You know, the sort of typical City thing never leaves your mind. I've seen City blow it on so many occasions. But if ever there was an opportunity to do this, because Pep Guardiola won't stay for forever, you know, players move on, De Bruyne's time will come to an end. I know he's reinvented Pep and he's brought in new players that have been just as good as the previous generation. We thought when Silva and Aguero and company and the likes were playing, they'll never be able to replace them. Well, you know what, they have done, and possibly even better. But the point is, I suppose that you know, City have never had a more, you know, confident mood about them. They swept United away 4-0 in the first half of the derby at the Etihad earlier this season. That was them at their best. You've seen what they did to Real Madrid, to Bayern Munich, to Arsenal, their main title rivals. If ever you're going to be confident as a City fan, I'm talking in general terms now, this is the most confident you should ever be.
Well,
but you're asking me, no, I'm not confident.
But the way that the Premier League has evolved this year, it's been a bit of a cruise for City and Arsenal. Nobody else is any good, frankly. For the fact that United are third, it just reflects how poor that league has been. Because this isn't a vintage United team by any stretch of the imagination. I'll be amazed if half of them are still here next season, because they're not good enough. They're never going to match City. But as Ian said,
You just answered the question for me, Peter. You're talking City up and United down.
It's a cruise for City this year. It really has been a cruise. That squad, the bench of City could walk into any team in the Premier League. 4 or 5 of them straight in, and I mean Arsenal as well. It's been that straightforward for City. So in that respect, it's hard for Guardiola to keep all those players happy. I mean, think of that Colfell, for instance, from Withenshaw. He's a great player, but he's not getting much of a chance at the moment. And he won't play in the FA Cup final. He'd be looking to make the bench, frankly. So there's lots of issues there for Guardiola to get a grip on. Whereas for United, it's a massive rebuild. I mean, if they brought in Harry Kane, the Betfred odds for next season will change quite dramatically, I'll tell you that. At the moment, United are 10-1 to take the crown off City, win the Premier League. But if Harry Kane comes in, I know we've used this cliche a million times, but the fact is, he would be a missing piece of the jigsaw. He is what United need. And that would affect the odds. And City were going to buy him before they got the wonder player, Haaland. Haaland, by the way, is Betfred having 5-2 to score the first goal at Wembley on Saturday. In what should be a spectacle with the whole of the world looking at Manchester United and Manchester City going head to head in the first ever Manchester derby in an FA Cup final.
And let's hope this game lives up to the expectations. And at the other side of the country, there's another massive event going on in the Betfred Super League.
Yeah, well, it's the Magic Weekend going on at St James's Park, Newcastle. This is when all the Super League teams play each other over a 2-day period. So we've got 12 teams in 6 games, starting off on Saturday with Salford against Hull KR, Wigan against Catalans, followed by Leeds against Castleford. I've spoken to Paul Sculthorpe about this, and he's predicting Hull will beat Salford, Catalans will beat Wigan, Leeds will beat Castleford, and then on Sunday he thinks that Lee will beat Wakefield. That's a fairly routine one because Wakefield haven't won any Betfred Super League games so far this season. He thinks Saints, who used to play for it, of course, will beat Huddersfield, and that Warrington, the Betfred Super League leaders, will beat Hull FC. And he says if those 6 come in, those forecasts as an accumulator, he's offering, Betfred are offering a boosted 14-1 for all those 6 results to come in. So that's an half decent bet. There's only really the Wigan Catalans and also Hull FC Warrington that will be toughly contested, although Saints against Huddersfield, that's not a given either. There is a report into Super League, IMG report, and one of the things that's supposedly going to be recommended is that there's no more Magic Weekend. and that it's wrong for the game, and they should concentrate on the Betfred Challenge Cup and the Grand Final. But I know Sculthorpe thinks this, and I certainly do. The Magic Weekend deserves to carry on because it's a unique event for rugby league. Not many other sports in the whole world can get all 12 teams playing over one weekend in a city that isn't normally associated with rugby league. So it brings in extra revenue and certainly spreads the word of this great game to other cities.
100%, it's an absolutely fantastic event. Well, thank you, Peter, as always. And if you do fancy a bet, you can bet online, on the app, or in Betfred stores.